Well, hello everybody. It's Joe Cioffi, Fios One News Long Island and Fios One News New Jersey.
And Joe Rao, Fios One News Lower Hudson Valley, and we have our eyes on Gordon. And I have a feeling, Joe, that in the coming days ahead we're going to have more and more eyes peeled on that other system that's out over the Atlantic Ocean, Florence.
La Florence.
La Florence.
Yes. I'm sure everybody already knows. Once upon a time we had all the secrets and we would tell everybody.
Yes.
Now everybody knows ahead of us because we like to sleep for a while
Right.
every so often. But
For intergovernmental use only.
right, remember the secret product. You're going to see continued flips back and forth. We talked about this yesterday with respect to Florence. Models from run to run keep emphasizing different things in the upper atmosphere, and we're going to get into that in just a bit. Do we want to talk about Gordon first, or should we talk about the Friday through Sunday break that's coming?
I don't know. What do you think? What do you think people are more interested in? I think people are more interested in wondering what their weekend is going to be like. And
all right, so let's do that first. We'll take a look at the. I'll load the sector first. How about we show them the dew points?
Okay.
I think that
which are not going down, at least in the immediate future.
Yes, but they'll get there. Right off the bat, let me just say, maps are courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, and we thank Levi Cowan very much for the use of his maps, and you should go see his site. If you're a weather junkie, you're probably already there. If you're mildly interested, you might want to take a look and get yourself familiar with all the stuff that we put on the air.
A lot of people are wondering, where the term tropical tidbits comes from, and all you need do, first-timers who have never been on tropical tidbits before, there are maps for all of the tropical systems that are out there.
In the world.
In the world. And if you're wondering about Gordon, for example, each day he provides an incredible synopsis that goes like 9 or 10 or 11 minutes. It's an amazing thing. And that alone makes the whole site very worthwhile.
And I usually share his videos, and you'll get them on Facebook. I usually try to put his YouTube links on. You can go to his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And then you can go to my YouTube channel after that. All right, so let's show everybody the fantastic dew points. Now, the so-called break for tomorrow, Joe, it's kind of like you're giving on the one hand and taking on the other, because the temperatures are likely to be about 5 degrees lower than today because of the wind coming in off the ocean. The problem is that the dew points are likely to be 5 degrees higher.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, it's
balances out.
It's still going to feel like it's between 95 and 100.
And that's why the National Weather Service has not lowered their heat advisory. In fact, for tomorrow, for Orange and Rockland and Westchester, Putnam, Dutchess, and a part of Ulster County, that heat advisory remains in effect until 9 o'clock tomorrow night, and for the simple reason that tomorrow afternoon, in spite of the edge being taken off of the temperature, as Joe just mentioned, the higher level of dew point temperatures.
And they're all here. We're all in the middle 70s.
Right.
So we were a little bit lower than that today, but the temperatures were up in the low to mid 90s.
So I mean, your local temperature tomorrow, instead of getting 92, it's like 87. With the higher level of humidity tomorrow, it still is going to feel like...
It's still a hashtag bad hair day.
Yeah.
So the dew points that I have up here are for 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, and you can see they're in the low and middle 70s just about everywhere. The temperatures are going to be a little bit cooler, although there might be some 90s tomorrow in inland New Jersey. You go west of the Garden State Parkway, you're going to see temperatures up around or over 90. But if you're right along the immediate coast, it's probably going to be more like the low and mid 80s. Long Island the same, probably low to mid 80s, and maybe right on the beaches with an east wind, it'll be closer to 80. So at least if you're off tomorrow and you can go to the shore and you won't have to pay, at least on Long Island you won't have to pay. You'll get a bit of a break on the South Shore, not on the North Shore, maybe not so much. But back to the dew points, because this is where I think we're going to be a lot happier to some degree, but we get a cold front. Oops, I jumped too far ahead here. Let me go back. Okay, so here we go for tomorrow into Thursday. So actually, there's the right map. This is tomorrow, which is basically up in the low 70s.
And let's also point out that yes, there is however slight, a possibility of a hit or miss shower or renegade thunderstorm. Although
Didn't happen today.
I'd have to say that the odds tomorrow are something like on the order of less than 10%, which means if you're hoping for a cooling thunderstorm, you can hope, but don't count on it. Don't hold your breath.
Here we go. After we get a cold front to come through here Thursday night with a Thursday evening with some potential for some strong thunderstorms when it goes through. Those dew points do come down on Friday. We've got 50s dew points, Long Island to about New York City. Still a little on the high side in southern New Jersey. And then on Saturday, we really get a nice push of dew point. The dew points down into the 40s. And this goes back to a run that we saw last week, which it took it away, and now it brought it back. And this has been the big problem with the forecast because we're trying to figure out the strength of the ridge in the east, and that's going to be critical to what happens with Florence. So we've got 40s dew points on Saturday. Look at that. That's Saturday night. You've got dew points in the 20s.
27.
Yeah, that's up at Kingston, I believe, and even up in parts of northwest New Jersey. We can only hope that that's the case.
I hope so too, Joe.
And then Sunday dew points are going to be in the 40s. I think we're going to get enough drying, Joe, if this is right, that we should break out in at least some sun, I would think. Maybe areas to the south might be closer to the cloud line because the front is going to stall out somewhere across the Delmarva Peninsula and Virginia back westward. And then going into next week, we're going to see those dew points come back up as the cold front comes back up as a warm front, and we're back into the 70s dew points come Tuesday, and then they just sort of stay there for much of next week. Of course, then it depends on what Florence does, and on the late afternoon GFS run, it brought it back further to the west. But we'll get to that separately in a second. Let's go to Gordon. How about we do that?
Sure. And Gordon is just 5 miles shy of a Category 1 hurricane. And so it's located right now literally just south of Mobile, Alabama.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to come ashore, west of Mobile and east of Gulfport, Biloxi, somewhere, I guess, in southeast Mississippi. It's moving steadily northwestward. The rain has been heavy in the Florida Panhandle, and now the rain is heavy in southern Alabama. But notice, throughout much of Mississippi, not yet. Southeast Louisiana, there have been some occasional downpours, but no big deal there. All the heavy rain with this is going to be northeast of the track, with very little on the other side. And the structure of the storm on the radar tells you that. There's the center is that circle there, that hook that's just off south of Mobile. But then look on the west side, there's just very little. This is a rather small tropical storm.
Right, but nonetheless, if you're near and along that track, you are going to see rain, and in some cases you may see, within a short interval of time, 6, 8, maybe at most 10 inches. That might be pushing the envelope a bit, but this looks like to be more of a rainmaker in terms of a wind maker, in terms of any potential damage that may occur from this system. And eventually, Joe, it's interesting, you pointed out about how dew points will come up, and early next week we'll be back in the thick of things, so to speak, literally and figuratively. We're also expecting some rain, and some of that rain, not all of it, but some of it will have some affiliation with all of what you're seeing on the screen right now, because as Gordon comes inland, it'll become an extratropical storm. It may actually change its character somewhat into a regular low-pressure system, which in turn may sweep across the Great Lakes later in the weekend, come into our range of influence here Monday and Tuesday. So some of that rain may be affiliated with what is now an almost Category 1 hurricane.
This is the Northwest Florida radar right now. The center of the tropical storm is right on the edge there toward the left. We'll go to the Mobile radar because I think that'll give us the best view with regards to seeing the actual center. And actually, in the last few hours, Joe, I noticed on one of the other radar shots that it looked like the center was becoming a little better defined. So perhaps there might be a last burst of energy here that will get it very close to the threshold of minimal hurricane. Perhaps the beginnings of an eye. One of the things, Joe, that's different with this, a few people have said to me, you have a storm in the Gulf of Mexico over 86-degree water. Well, how come it didn't strengthen to, a Category 2 or even a Category 3 hurricane, which it had time to do that if the conditions were right. And while the conditions were favorable, when you look at the satellite loop, there is some shear going on, and it's been fighting that. Let me see if I can lengthen the time length here. It probably will look a little bit better. And then you could see it. It's kind of getting stretched out to the northeast, and that's the shear that it's had to deal with. And you also could see the signature on this enhanced satellite is not the best looking tropical system. It doesn't have that. It's trying to get that kind of circular look, but it's sort of stretched out more to the northeast. With very little on the west side.
Yeah, the yellows and oranges and reds are probably more inducement from diurnal effects. Mid to late afternoon, the hottest part of the day, and of course, naturally, you would see the most likely time for convection in the form of heavier showers and thunderstorms, and that's probably why what you're seeing on your screen is happening. Not necessarily that the storm is suddenly and vigorously winding up or becoming robust simply on its own, and thankfully, it will be making landfall, because if it did stay over that warm Gulf of Mexico water for, let's say, another day or so, it certainly looks like it would start revving up to a more potent system. But just as it's starting to get its act together, that's when it's coming on shore, and that's when all that moisture is going to be wrung out as just some heavy rain.
Here's the recent recon that's gone through here. So the pressure's 1,000, 1,001, what it's measured. The red wind barbs here, north of the center, equivalent to 55 to 60 knots. So they're getting 70 mile an hour winds at flight level, and there's a fairly large band of 50 to 60 knot winds here on the north side, and that matches up to where all the convection is. Not very far from the coastline. Each one of these boxes is basically 30 miles, so we're talking a little more than 30 miles now. Here's the Alabama-Mississippi border, and there's your center. So it's going to be making landfall. The center is somewhere in southern Mississippi, and then continuing on its merry way, maybe near or just east of Gulfport, and then continuing on its merry way toward the northwest. And this is not going to be a rain producer like we saw with Harvey last year, where it sat there for 3 or 4 days.
Oh, no.
This is just going to be moving right along. There will be 4 to 6 inch plus rain amounts, or even higher, north and east of the center, but that should be it. We're not talking about 30, 40 inches of rain or anything like that.
Right. And people down there, I watched some news reports on some of the network news channels, and they seem to be like, oh well, yeah, it's a hurricane. Well, you can expect it at this time of the year.
Yeah, they are resilient.
Yeah.
Here's just the last advisory we have. So this is the 7 p.m. advisory. And as always, we just want to say, and just remember this for future reference in case it becomes something that we ever have to deal with. The maps that we show you, this is the Hurricane Center's map. So this is something you'd want to look at for sure. But as far as the other weather maps are concerned, you really shouldn't use those for making decisions. You want to go to official websites, nhc.noaa.gov for the National Hurricane Center, and your local National Weather Service office, which you can get to at weather.gov. So here's the track that they forecast. It's been fairly consistent, hasn't seen much change. So I think now we can jump over to Florence, which, in spite of the fact that the water temperatures here are warm, but they're marginally warm, and despite the fact that there's some moderate shear going on, Florence has actually gotten itself to 85 miles an hour based on satellite estimates, and it became a hurricane, and it's continuing to move on a course basically to the west-northwest, and it's still, Joe, it's way out. We're talking 1,300 miles east of the Leeward Islands.
Right, and now the question is, we're going to play the game of splits and blocks, so to speak, between now and about the middle part of next week. We've got 2, maybe 3 shortwave troughs that are going to try to interact with Florence and maybe try to drag it to the north.
And we can actually bring those up. So you keep going. I'll bring them up.
Yeah. So, and as Joe mentioned, she's a long way out still, and the Atlantic Ocean just large enough so that we're going to see how that storm interacts every few days it's going to do or try to interact, and depending upon the forces out there over the ocean, this thing may bob and weave and whatever. The original thought was that it was just going to get to about the central Atlantic and then start curving almost due north on up toward Greenland, and now it's looked like at least in some models, that it's going to be kind of undulating, going north and south on a course that conceivably is going to try to take it close to the Atlantic seaboard.
Well, I put the first upper air because you were talking about troughs and ridges that are going on. So this is the map for next Sunday evening.
Right.
And this illustrates the problem that we've been talking about for a number of days now. So we have, of course, the arrival of our dry air mass and big high, and that's going to be caused by this trough that I'm going to draw here in red, that by the time we get to Sunday night is going to be off the coast east of Nova Scotia, east of the Canadian Maritimes. Now, it would seem the bottom part of that trough, Joe, is right from the Delaware coast with that line where you see 585. So the upper air winds here are generally going, west to east, up and right across the North Atlantic. And you would think, you look at this and you think, well, it's pretty close to it. That's actually a fair distance south. It may miss this trough.
Right.
And I think this is one of the struggles that the models have had in trying to figure out, is it going to get picked up? Is it not going to get picked up? It would seem, based on all the models today, that this first trough is not going to be the one to pick it up, but it might be enough to draw it further north. And I'm going to jump now to a couple of days after that. And this is for Tuesday. Now, this is where the model changed late this afternoon. And I'm going to put it on the paint box.
Now, this is the 18Z.
Whoa. What am I doing here?
I don't know.
Hang on. I'm trying to get my paint box up here. All right, so let me get rid of this. And
what we're showing right now, though, is the mid-afternoon of the 18Z.
Right. Which is every bit as useless as any other model that we could look at, so it doesn't matter. So now we're at Tuesday. Let me just make sure everybody's got it on the screen. There's a second short wave, and that's this one here, right in there. Okay. That is going to bring this. That's going to be responsible for lifting up the cold front that comes through Thursday night, comes back up as a warm front on Sunday night, Monday. We get some downpours with that, and that's short wave. It's that short wave that some of the models earlier today, the GFS and the European, not the Canadian, when that moves off into southeastern Canada, that was the one that was going to pick that up
and kick it
out. But what we've been struggling with for days is the fact if this short wave doesn't dig down, in other words, if those upper air westerly winds don't drop far enough south because this trough is weaker, then you're going to have to deal with this, and that's this upper high that's sitting off the Atlantic coast, because that's going to want to build as soon as that trough lifts.
Right.
And when we go, I'll move it now to next Wednesday, and we'll put this on the paint box now. And this is what the European was doing yesterday, which it backed off from overnight and today. Now we'll see what it does tonight when it comes in. But now, Joe, that big upper high builds around it.
Kind of cradles it.
Exactly that. So now we've got this big upper high. Okay, remember that winds blow clockwise around highs. Everybody watching at home. So now suddenly you've got an east-southeast flow in the Atlantic south of 35 north. It's shielding it from these westerly winds that have retreated northward. So that trough never picks it up. Right. Now you've got a ridge that's building up in eastern Canada, and this would argue that you could wind up with it tracking closer to the coast.
Right.
Every run changes the dynamics of these upper air features, so we keep getting these different solutions, in terms of where the storms wind up. And I've been telling everybody, try not to focus so much on what the surface is doing, because that's not going to do you any good at this point anyway. Try and focus more on what we've been illustrating here with respect to the upper air, because I think that at the end of the day is good. I mean, this is what's going to ultimately determine whether this winds up near the coast or not.
And, go back a week, and we were saying last week, this particular upcoming weekend looks like it could be great. We have low humidity and very... Then all of a sudden, the model changed its mind and had us going for a few days saying, well, forget about that. All of that nice dry air is going to stay to north. Now it changed its mind again. So this is how we're going to be flip-flopping back and forth. Not just from one day to another, but literally from one run to the next.
We know what's out there. That's the kind of way I'm kind of looking at it. We know what the puzzle pieces are. We are not going to know for quite a while how all these pieces are going to finally wind up. And the hurricane tracking models have actually gone to the left this evening, and the vast majority of them now want to keep this thing on a west-northwest course and get it left of 60, and in some of them have it even left of 65. So, these models have also now trended to the left.
And not just the track of this storm, but also the intensity of the storm. You were talking about how impressed you were by the strength on the 18Z of this particular run of what Florence seemingly is trying to evolve into. What did you say in terms of millibar? You said what, 929 or 9?
Yeah, just some ridiculous number. I mean, who knows if that's even real?
Yeah.
One other factor here that's in play that's going to be part of this equation, Joe. If you look here on the wide satellite loop, let me just make sure everybody can see all the systems involved. On the far left, upper left, you have Gordon. Toward the off to the right, as you move east, you have these clouds that run from north of the Leeward Islands. That's an upper air trough that's creating wind shear conditions, and that hasn't moved for the last few days. Florence is going to come into that and probably weaken a bit.
Right.
And that is, and I've been saying and thinking that is going to be very, very important, because if it weakens it somewhat, it's going to favor a more westerly course, because the steering winds at the bottom of the atmosphere are going to remain east to west, even though that the upper air winds, if this were a deep, intense hurricane, it would react to the upper air winds, which would take it more north-northwest and then north.
Right.
So that zone of shearing, I think, is going to be very critical to the ultimate, the final track and how far west it gets.
Yeah.
And then we have a wave off that's come off the African coast a couple of days ago and is now southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands, and that appears to be getting a little better organized. You kind of see a bit of a swirl there, and the Hurricane Center now has this as a 90% chance of becoming a tropical depression over the next 5 days. So I think the bottom line is that we have a lot of questions that are going to remain on the table for I would say at least for the rest of this week. So
quiet during August, and now as soon as we've moved into September, all of a sudden everything starts to pop, just like as we pointed out back in 1961.
Where August had no storms. We actually had 2 small tropical storms this August. There was none in that August.
Right.
And 61, I believe, is tied with the most majors with last year, or may still hold the record. I forgot how many majors we had last year. It was either the same or it was one shy. But there were 6 majors, I believe, during the month of September that year.
Looks like it's going to be fun.
So, Jason Kaplan, we've answered your question the best as we can. And I'm just running through everybody's, some of the chat comments. Daniel Kirby, you know how the weekend's going to be for you. You got that right. With more rain. That poor, oh my God, the rain there has been totally out of control. I had somebody on my YouTube channel who's from his area in the I think it was from Oklahoma, and they've only had an inch where he's been. It's only 1 3/4 inches of rain for the last 4 months. And I said, talk to Daniel. Don't talk to Johnny Quest, who's Daniel Kirby. Talk to him. He'll send you plenty of rain from the 40 inches that he's had.
Yeah, and parts of southeast Pennsylvania, Lancaster, for example, and the Amish country.
Yes,
and Hershey too. They've had their fair share.
Let's see. Farm stands galore, says Nancy Manglis. Pluto going out east this weekend. You'll probably be dealing with somewhat of a crowd, but certainly the summer crowd will be a lot less. And Matt Steckler, correct. AC off, windows open in a big way.
Yeah, that's everybody. I think everybody will be so happy to finally shut those air conditioners and fans off and let nature's air conditioning system do its job.
When will hurricane hunters go into Florence? I doubt you're going to see anything go into Florence until it gets at least west of 60. When it if it starts getting to a point where it's getting closer to Bermuda, that's when they'll probably start to send planes in. And by the way, the satellite estimates a lot of the times are actually pretty good now.
Yeah,
sometimes they used to be way off. Now they're actually quite good.
Well, now we have GO 16, which is providing us with fantastic imagery and also more data about what's going on with not only just hurricanes and tropical systems, but with all kinds of weather systems. And I can hardly wait so that they get another GOES like that up to cover western North America and the Pacific Ocean.
The temps along the coast of Florence comes, this is Sid Jokum, temps along the coast, I'm assuming he means water temperatures, would Florence maintain its intensity? Likely not. The water temperatures north of 35, while they are warm and they are a little warmer than normal, they actually have cooled in the last week or two because the heat that we've been having has been on a west wind, which is not a wind that usually warms the water up. So the water temperatures have actually kind of eased back to the low and mid 70s. So the answer is no, it would not.
Right.
And also the other thing is, and this is a rule I've always used, if we get to a point where we have to start talking about this on a more serious nature, and we don't know that it ever will, but I've always maintained that unless you have some kind of trough, like we had back in late July and August, those troughs that we had, unless you have something like that in the upper atmosphere, it's very, very hard to bring a storm up the East Coast. And when I say by up the East Coast, I mean north of 35, because while the ridge will try and steer it perhaps toward the southeast, there's nothing. It needs that southerly flow to kind of move it up,
divert it up.
Otherwise, it's going to respond by trying to move around the periphery of the upper high, the way where how the high sets up would be key, and you'd wind up taking it just offshore. I mean, it would just go offshore and then gradually turn to the northeast.
Exactly.
That's usually how it works, in theory, anyway. All right, so I think we tried to get everybody here. We didn't get to say hello to everyone, so a collective hello to all of you who have. And
we decided now on Fridays we'll have like an open mic Friday or
we'll do Ask Us Anything type of Friday, and if we don't get to your answer we don't get to your question, we'll go back on and comment right on Facebook for you. So so think about what you might want to ask us 3 days from now. There'll be a lot of changes, I'm sure, in the models over the next few days as this Florence mystery continues to intensify.
Indeed.
All right. So I got FiOS 1 News, Long Island and New Jersey at the top of the hour, so please stay tuned.
And at the top of the hour, for all of you who are watching from the lower Hudson Valley, yours truly will be there. And in the morning, we'll have Brian Fitzgerald and Jeff.
Jeffrey.
Why did I say Greg?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Jeff Banson. And in the midday hours, we'll have Brittany Borer and Addison Green. And come mid-afternoon, ta-da!
You and I will be back. Shall we say goodbye with what we were humming earlier?
Oh.
You ready?
Go right ahead.
Where, oh, where are you tonight? Why did you leave me here all alone? I searched the world over and thought I found true love. You met another and you were gone. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Yes, by all means, end it.